First and foremost is I've been doing superannuation now since 1988 when I worked at KPMG at that time, and I think one of the first funds I ever worked on the tax side of things was the Qantas Staff Superannuation Fund. And we had a whole coterie of superannuation funds at that time, and I've moved and had a look at the retail space, a couple of industry funds, and then moved into self-managed in 1993 when the introduction of the Superannuation Industry Supervision Bill was announced. Some of you may well remember that. In fact, we're coming up to a 20-year anniversary of these brand new superannuation rules. And a lot has changed and transpired since then, and the government, for its better want at that time, introduced a little baby fund called an excluded fund, which had 4 members in it, and it was essentially excluded from many of you in this space the prospectus provisions at that time, the actuarial requirements, a lot of the defined benefit standard requirements. And who would know that that would then transmogrify into something that has really grown quite large. What I wanted to do today is probably challenge you with a few things, just give you a bit of a background for us. As I said, I'm moving away, I'm not here at all. We're all in superannuation together, and we always have been. We just simply have different parts of the big pie. One of the things that I can tell you our members are very concerned about at the moment, and we've got great engagement with our members. We've got 3,000 members in the SMSF Members Association. I can send out a survey, and within 2 hours I will get a 20 to 30% response rate from those people. The last one I sent out was in relation to the increase in the SMSF levy last Friday, and that was as a result of the PJC wanting our views. As I said, within 2 hours we had 500 people come back out of our 2,500 to 3,000 members. And we don't do yes and no's, we actually do qualitative and let them have their say about things, whether that's right or wrong. And I can imagine that'd be the same thing with your guys. If most people are fairly concerned about where the government's going in terms of superannuation, it's okay for someone like my father who's 80 and has taken all the benefit of the bull run and the tax-free status and all that. But here I am yesterday actually, finally got to 55, so I've started my transition retirement income stream as of yesterday. So I never thought I'd get there, but effectively I'm there. But it still worries me that changes that are going to come down 5, 10, 15 years down the track may have a significant impact on my retirement, simply because there's a concern about the budget forecast. And I think as an industry, whether it's AIST, ASFA, ASMA or whoever, we all need to band together and just make sure that that doesn't happen. And then obviously things will change. I've got a few little things here and I've got a challenge. One of the areas of our business that I do a lot of study, the Bible for me probably is the Deloitte's actuaries, the dynamics of the Australian super system that always comes out each year for the next 20 years. So I'm not sure if anyone's from Deloitte's here, but that's my little Bible. I really have a look at that about forecasts of where trends are going. Last year 40,000 funds were set up, self-managed super funds. The majority of them are from the Gen X, those people born between 1964 and also 1982. It's surprising when you have a look at the Deloitte statistics currently, they are the biggest super generation of any class at the moment. They hold around about $540 billion and they outstrip the baby boomers, who many of us have worked for a long time trying to talk about their dollars and access their dollars. Baby boomers are, unless you're in a fund now, if they've chosen industry or retail or self-managed, you're not going to budge them. They should stay where they are and really work it as hard as is possible. The next big generation, as I said, is Gen X. And Gen X are huge. They are accumulators. The leading edge of them around coming up to age 50. So in the next 5 or 6 years, they'll be moving into that retirement phase or looking towards retirement. But they've got a really big back end on them. And they're all primarily accumulators. And for all of us, long-term business is about accumulation. It is certainly not about the drawdown phase. Drawdown phase goes and disappears. And if you're focusing on baby boomers, you're going down the wrong stretch. So Gen Xers are the real ones. They're a funny beast. They went through the last recession. They're probably the first ones that really understand the power of the internet and technology. They don't necessarily tweet or Facebook, but they will go and research and understand, and I think that's a good thing for all of us. We're seeing that a lot of Gen Xers are moving over from industry and retail funds into self-managed super funds. Primarily for a lot of them, it's about engagement. And I think when the engagement, I think you guys have had some great sessions on engagement here. And engagement's really cool. I'm going to give you a couple of ideas around it, but engagement by its very nature is where you can control a fund. And that's always been the case with self-managed super funds. If you can get into that control, or what I'm going to talk about, de facto control, then you've actually got someone engaged, because they've made a stance that this to me is where I am taking my monies. And it really makes a big difference with Gen X, because the difference between Gen X and baby boomers is that generally we've had two people, both spouses, in the relationship who have actually benefited from SGC since 1992. As opposed to the baby boomers, there might have only been one person, and the other person might have been looking after the kids at home. So Gen X is pretty important. I also know how many Gen X females are in here. So that's, yeah, I mean, Gen X seems to have a plethora of Gen X women who actually want to get out and work and really work hard. And that's been beneficial for super, because they've got a lot of SGC and it's now starting to build up. On average, to give you an understanding, and I've done a lot of work on this, but a couple around 40 years of age, and you should know this, together have probably got between $250,000 to $320,000 in super together. Now, the problem about that, which is good for you guys, you need to look after and keep it, but it's also prime for SMSFs, because it's about that stage when they start to coordinate it together that they can actually say, well, hold on, I can go out and start to do this stuff myself. The biggest problem that you've got in facing this is that obviously with the ability to borrow in super, and now with the banks lending up to 80%, outlay of $250,000 turns into $1 million property portfolio really quickly. And of course, just like anything, you can see the sharks are circling around that. And there's been a lot of dubious deals, as you can imagine. I'm from the Gold Coast, so you can imagine the sort of stuff that goes on there. Every week someone comes and says, oh, can you talk? And I say, well, it's not my style. If you put your peg to someone's property development, I can tell you it's always going to fail in some way, shape or form, except, of course, C-Bus. But anyway, that's a different thing. The engagement's inherent, as I said. Members like to take control. One of the big areas that I'd be concerned about for you is that we've now gone down the track that accountants will be able to get what we call an exempt licence. How that works under the corporations regs, that you can actually have an exempt licence, seems to me to be an anathema of the licensing regime in the first place. But the government's expecting between 5,000 to 10,000 accountants taking up the cudgel. And where it's been in the past is that they've only been able to advise someone to establish a fund. Now they're actually going to be able to, through this exempt licence, advise people to come out of an industry fund or a retail fund, provided, of course, the best interest test is taken up, which I think is absolutely crucial. But importantly, you're going to have 5,000 to 10,000 accountants out there selling against your business. Now, it's going to take some time. You've got about a 4 to 5 year window on that. But it's really important that you guys start to say, okay, well, this is coming down the track. What do I need to do to protect my turf? How do I go about making sure that my members are engaged? The ones who are not engaged, the ones who have got like 4 or 5 or 6 industry funds or retail funds who've got no idea what's going on, I don't worry about them, because they're going to stay where they are. It does worry me, though, that if they haven't had contributions going in, that they end up in consolidated revenue at some point down the track. I think that's a concern for all the industry. So, what can we do in terms of engagement from your perspective? And this is my challenge to you. First one, I came up with a bit of an idea last year. I went over to a lot of conferences. I don't know when anyone's been to a Salesforce conference over in San Francisco, but they're pretty wild affairs. 100,000 people going to these conferences. But the big thing that came out of there was gamification. That is simply turning your process or system into a game. What I would say to you, the one that I came up with probably after a couple of red wines is, would it be possible, one is that for a lot of your people, as you're going down the track, I know Paul's going to be talking about it, but as you engage and let them to have more choice around their investments, more choice around having a small portfolio of shares or managed funds or whatever you're doing. If you go down that track, actually allowing them to compare each other's portfolio against the others to see how they're performing. And after a year or two, that if whoever does well, they get $20,000 as a prize as being the one from, the people from age 30 to 40 or 40 to 50, because they'll have roughly the same balances. It's pretty out there, but the main thing is there that the purpose for us is to actually get them engaged. And again, that build a lookalike SMSF, you can still build something inside your current systems that does allow them to make the choice. But when you make the choice, you actually have to go out and show them how this is enabling them to control their superannuation fund. The one thing that's probably difference between self-managed and your funds is that we can bring spouses together in one consolidated platform, so they're looking at as a joint effort. If that is possible inside your system, and I always look at what is possible, if you can actually blend spouses together in your one platform, then suddenly you can actually have a consolidated balance. And to me, it shouldn't be that difficult given the systems that we got today. The other one that I would say to you is that I can't see, and I know I was having a chat with the other Paul from Host Plus, that there's a position there that AMP's tried to have a crack at it. They've done a very bad job, is to have a very cheap admin platform. Now there's, and then what I mean is a true SMSF admin platform that your members can go into. If you're losing some, why not have a bridge and say we can do this? But I would have it with a caveat that they cannot make full choices. They've actually got a limit on the choices they can have, maybe the top 50 stocks, and also maybe perhaps a cash management account with ME Bank, and more importantly, feeding back into your managed funds, the ones that you're currently looking after, or the ones that Gary and Ian obviously look after, that mainly feeding back inside there. And then I think if you do that and you limit their choices, the number of transactions that would go through, even though they're engaged, they are the trustee, it's going to be extremely limited, and you're not going to have to spend a fortune on the admin platform. If you can get it down to $500 or less for the admin, you're going to clean up. And that's the hard thing, is that at the moment the accounting fraternity is probably charging maybe $2,000 to $2,500 for admin. If you come back and do what you did to the retail funds, to the SMSF funds, you're going to end up with a significant sway. And also there'll be a large interest, I would have thought, in a lot of people who have set up to come to a cheaper option. So I would challenge the AIST to have a look at these sort of things. The final one is the SMSF loans for property are taking off. While there's still law, and who knows what will happen after the May budget, but while there's still law, it seems to me that if we got that halfway house, why ME Bank isn't offering, I'm not sure why they're not offering SMSF loans over property. It is a fast-growing sector. The Gen X love it. There's not much you can do to stop it. So my feeling for a lot of you guys is we've got to look, this is the demographics, this is the next stage. I'd also point to you that by 2028, there's going to be around about $2.6 trillion sitting in self-managed, but at the same point in time, there's going to be around about $2.5 trillion sitting in accumulation accounts in Gen X. And it doesn't mean everyone's going to go over to SMSFs. There's a lot of pool there that we should all be fighting for that money as this Gen X move through. And the ones behind that are even more important, because the Gen Ys are actually going to be in the system a hell of a lot longer, because preservation ages will increase, plus they'll get the 12%. So as we go through, and this is what I try and teach people, is that as each generation moves through the system, effectively we need to have different marketing techniques, different engagement techniques, because the way to engage a Gen Y is completely different to engaging a Gen X. So that's my view from SMSFs, and I would challenge you to actually start challenging us and building some systems that I believe you've got a really good opportunity to do this. I've spoken to retail funds many a time, and they just don't seem to get it. So I don't mean that's a bad thing. They just don't seem to understand that's a space. For me, I believe you've got a good opportunity. Whether you take it or not, feel free. Look, I'm always open if you want to have a chat about it, because, as I said, super's there to grow. and it's just going to continue to grow with us, without SMSFs, without industry funds, retail. It's just going to grow. We should all partake and really thank goodness for Paul Keating and Bob Hawke for introducing SGC in 1992. Who'd ever thought at that time that one introduction would give us all a job for life?
I was thinking about this topic and trying to work out what you guys would want to think about at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so how I've framed this discussion is mostly about the questions. If I was in your shoes, I'd be asking myself. And they are the questions that our board is asking itself as well. So I thought I might throw up some questions and give you some insights into what we're thinking. But at the end of this, each fund strategy is its own, and each fund strategy must be its own. So I'm going to just try and create a couple of sparks for some thoughts. I'm also going to hope that when I press this button, something happens. It didn't. Thank you. So, the SMSF space. Are they the devil? I used to think the SMSF space was the devil, and then I realised actually it's a range of people who sell to the SMSF space who are the devil. The actual concept has some absolute charms for individual members, and it became very confronting to me when I thought about these three people. A gas line LNG worker on Curtis Island telling one of our people that their union has got them a really good deal now, so they're on a good wicket. They probably need a self-managed fund. A paper worker who says we want to have an SMSF in our enterprise agreement because my mate's got one and I want one. And the two manufacturing workers from an ethnic community in southeast Victoria who want to set up a self-managed fund because they've been told if they buy one of the houses and their work colleague buys the other house, they can rent it from each other and then own it. Now, I don't think there'd be a week where people don't ring up and say, one of our traditional constituencies says, oh, what about these self-managed funds? In fact, I've met a number of people around this room who may even have a self-managed fund. I've met members of investment teams of large industry funds who don't necessarily invest in their own fund. Now, to me, that's the question. There's $400 billion in this sector. It's got some advantages: real business property, the ability to negative gear, the opportunity to work as a household, and Grant tells the story magnificently well. The question for me and for all of us is, are they the devil that we should reject, or can we embrace, or can we coexist? And I would say that's the question for each of your funds. Is this actually an issue for you? Are you actually worried about this? What are you going to do about it? And as Gary Weaven helpfully said to me the last time Grant and I spoke about this, he goes, all very well to talk about it, Paul, but what the bloody hell's happening? And I think that's the next step. What are we actually going to do about it? So looking into the future, it seems to me there's some really important questions that each fund could ask itself about this topic. And they're both mostly about retention, I think. I don't think we're going to go gaining much market share. I think it's about retention. For Australian Super, by the way, that Gen X group that Grant was talking about, we've got 950,000 members between the age of 31 and 50. 950,000 members. And if 10% of those were independent controllers who wanted to control their assets, what does that mean? And I suspect you'll all have the same sort of potential time bomb in your membership. So the questions we asked ourselves were these: who is leaving? When are they leaving? How long are they in the fund before they leave? Where are they going? And why are they going? And I think each of us needs to know the answers to those questions before you can work out whether this is an issue, or whether it's an issue worth spending money on, or an issue worth taking any time to. Now, you might all have the answers to those questions. It took us a long time to answer those questions. Who's going? That is, how old are they? How much money have they got? When are they going? How long are they in the fund before they leave the fund? Where are they going? And in our case, actually, we're in a pretty remarkably good position currently. $237 million left our fund to set up a self-managed fund. last year, which is, as a proportion of the overall outflows, not very significant. Where are they going and why are they going? Are they going because they're unhappy with you? Are they going because they've heard about the great promised land of self-managed fund? Or are they going because when they go to the golf club and they don't have a self-managed fund, they've got nothing to talk about? If you decide that it matters, and for us, we think it matters because of the pipeline and where things are going. If you decide that it matters, then you have to work out what you want to do about it. I love chickens. The question is, you could sell to the sector, and Paul Watson's going to talk about the PST idea, I think, at Hostplus. You could sell to the sector. You could say, I've got these core capabilities and I'm going to come and sell it to your sector. It's a very fragmented sector. It's a difficult sector to get to. That sector, by the way, says they're the true all profits to members, non-profit sector. They can't even pay themselves a fee. They say they are the not-for-profit sector. We could sell to them. We could buy one of them. So there's a number of outfits around at the moment who service this sector, and we could buy one of those and move straight in that way and put a brand across the front of it. We could build towards the sector, and that's our current strategy, which is to say it is genuinely true that some people want a lot more control. It is genuinely true that a lot of people want to see their super at the individual level. It is genuinely true that people want to transact. It's genuinely true that people want to see their tax at their individual level. So we've been building towards the sector, not to replace the sector, not to be the sector, but to say if 10 or 15% of people really want control over their assets, and by the way, myth number one, mostly these people don't buy wine collections, mostly they don't buy stamps, mostly they don't buy managed funds, and if you look up the ATO stats, of the 400 billion, 150 or 75 billion is shares and 100 or so is cash. That's what they buy. They buy shares and cash, and guess what we're really good at? Shares. Members' equity is really good at cash. So we can do shares and cash. That's what they want to buy. But we're talking about building towards it. And that's what we've built with FNZ. And just as a one sort of gauge of that, we've got this member direct product, and others will have other types of arrangements. And it now has $1.3 billion in it, and we haven't launched it. $1.3 billion, and we haven't launched it. And it's predominantly, more than half equities, about 25% term deposits and the rest in cash. And I'm not sure if anyone from Members Equities here, but that's something we've built with FNZ. And one great feature of that is Members Equity is the cash management hub. Now, some of the other arrangements that are around, you have to buy their cash, and you have to buy their cash at 80 or 90 or 100 basis points. And so that's really funding it. So it's been a really positive development for us. $200 or $300 million is in ME at any one time. So you can sell to them, you could buy one of them, you could build to them, and that's our current strategy, and that has a whole host of implications about service, advice, connection, communications, which is totally different to our normal mass communication. Or you could provide the platform, and I think Grant threw up that idea. The idea of gamification, we can easily do that. There's a mob called WealthSpan who do some really interesting things about this, but what we think we'll do is give members the opportunity to invest against others to see how they perform. I don't know if you've spoken to people with self-managed funds. They always seem to be performing really well. It's like talking to a punter. They've always just ahead of who? Everyone. Which benchmark? We don't have one. How do you track your performance? We don't do it. How can you be ahead of what? Anyway, it's an aside. We think we can give members on Member Direct the opportunity to say, how did I perform against somebody else? Because that probably is their benchmark. Especially if you're a young investor, how do you go against somebody else? This issue of performance measurement in self-managed funds is a potent problem for them. So I think the options for all of us in this room is to work out, first of all, is this a problem and is it a retention issue? Who's going? When are they going? Why are they going? And then to think about what the possible strategies are. And I think there's basically four. You can sell to them and distribution's difficult and they don't buy managed funds. You could buy one of them, and I think most of the offerings out there are pumped up and overstated, and some of them will come to market at ridiculous multiples. You could build towards the sector, which is a strategy we and some other funds are taking, or we could provide the platform. And I think somewhere providing the platform, somewhere might be worthwhile. Somebody's going to industrialise a part of this. Someone's going to do that, and it may as well be all of us on our white chargers that fixes it up. Thanks very much.
I'm not here to sell you an SMSF. Unlike the AFR last weekend, if any of you read it, there were 4 full-page colour ads telling people how easy it was, how hassle-free it was, almost foolproof. If you had an SMSF, you're on the way to retirement nirvana. Just simply pick up an off-the-plan property and away you go. Loans in 10 minutes. Incredible. So we'll talk a little bit about some of that today as well. I want to start with a couple of statistics just to frame what I'm going to say a little bit about what Hostplus is doing in this space. I call it the rule of 70 because that number comes up a couple of times in some interesting ways. Firstly, 70% of all superannuation managed today is managed by professional managed superannuation funds, be they industry funds, retail, corporate, public sector funds. Obviously, by definition, the balance, some 31, in fact, I just checked this morning, it's 31.5%, are in the SMSF space. It is the largest single sector of superannuation today, and as Grant said earlier, growing rapidly. And this would be not untypical of a number of industry super funds particularly, but on our count, about 70% of our members today, and we've got around 1.1 million of them, they will rely partly or wholly on the age pension at retirement. So for the vast majority of our members, they aren't thinking about SMSFs, and so that is our rock and that is the base of our very large pyramid, and we're very focused on that group. However, we do need to do what we can and to honour the choices that they will make as they go through their journey to retirement, to do as much as we can to reduce that reliance and to have them have the most dignified retirement and independent retirement as we can manage. Thirdly, again, I don't think this would be untypical of a number of particular industry funds. 7 out of 10 members today within our fund won't be with us to have that conversation that Grant's having at 55 or after about retirement. So we're a fantastic incubator of superannuation. We do a terrific job of growing people's superannuation as they go through that journey. But for a number of reasons, we don't make it easy for people, and I'm talking generically now as well as with my own fund, we don't make it easy for people to choose to stay with us on that journey. So we need to understand the decisions they're making, why they're making them, to honour those decisions and then to make informed decisions as to how we will react to those. You'll make up your minds, your funds will make up your minds whether SMSFs are the new men's shed or not. We have, and as I said earlier, SMSFs form the largest single subsector of superannuation, and it is trending and growing rapidly. Before we walk out of this room today, 20 SMSFs will have been established in the hour that you've been in here. 150 will have been established before you leave this conference today. 760 odd SMSFs will be born this week, and as Grant said earlier, that sums to about 40,000 a year. So given the average balance of an SMSF, which is just under $1 million, that's $38 billion this year will move from managed super fund to SMSF space. That's 3 Hostpluses. That's half, roundabout, depending on what's happening today, Ian, of an Australian super. So just bear that in mind as we go through today, those numbers. And interestingly too, in case you're wondering how much in terms of numbers of funds SMSFs make up, they are 99% of all superannuation funds in Australia. 99% of all funds are SMSFs by number, not FUM, not trustees, but by number of funds. So we take those stats pretty seriously. They're pretty sobering. Just to add a little bit more context, outside of the superannuation space, what are people doing with their non-superannuation money? Well, again, it is trending towards direct investment as well. GFC had a fair amount to do with that, but as that slide demonstrates, and we're about sort of halfway or a bit over halfway on that continuum, by the end of this decade, a quarter of all money outside of superannuation will be invested directly. People are actually deciding to take those things on directly. Their advisors are telling them to take it on directly rather than through a range of managed solutions. A couple of other quick ones just before I get into what, as a case study, I suppose we're doing as in our shop. Let's just put a couple of fallacies to bed. The other drivers behind our approach to dealing with the SMSF challenge, which I'll talk about shortly, include the growing number of trustees, as Grant mentioned earlier, are actually under 45 years of age. So this is not the golden years retirement plaything, even though 1 in 4 retirees today has an SMSF, 1 in 4. And as Grant mentioned earlier, I think the thing that's really given this a kicker has been the ability for SMSFs to now borrow, non-recourse borrowing, to buy a property and hold it within an SMSF fund. And particularly when the brakes came off in terms of making that residential property, just read the Fin Review this weekend. I would wager that those 4 full-page colour ads will be there again, and it'll give you some sense of how that's going. Paul talked earlier about how do we actually measure and compare performance between an SMSF and managed funds. Well, I'll just take a stab at it using ATO data, so it's a little bit nebulous. But you know what? At the moment, we're trending pretty much neck and neck. That's based on the last year's results, 7.7 versus 7.8 for collective APRA managed funds. Go back a few years, managed funds were ahead. Go back a couple of other years, SMSFs are ahead. It's a bit of a neck and neck race. So let's put that one to bed, that one is overly better than the other in terms of performance on an average scale. But I think most tellingly and more importantly, we've all heard the horror stories about 8% MERs, people starting SMSFs with $30,000 and the like. But the average SMSF today enjoys an MER of around 0.5%. Now, 40% of SMSFs actually enjoy an MER of 25 basis points or less. Now, I suspect, like me, if you had an MER of that character and nature, you'd be doing a lot of business and you'd have a lot of pretty happy members. So we need to really recognise that, and that's a competitive issue. So, as a fund, Hostplus, we could do one or two things. We could take that and a plethora of other information and research into hand, do nothing, stick our heads in the sand, say this is going to go away, it is the new men's shed, let's just wait this out, or we could do something about it. We've chosen to do the latter. The first stage of that program, and we've recently reviewed our strategic product and service proposition, and stage 1 of that commences in a number of weeks' time. Similar to Australian Super, we will be launching our version of a direct investment platform within Hostplus. Funnily enough, we've included the name Plus in our marketing name for that, so Choice Plus will be the name of our product. Out of the box, it is a true SMSF light alternative. Light in that we won't deal with direct property, not at this point. We won't deal with collectibles, so your Grange collection, your art, that sort of stuff is not in scope. But what is the 60% of investments that SMSFs make today. Australian shares, term deposits, fixed interest, cash. Why are we doing this? First and foremost, it is a retention strategy. As Grant mentioned earlier, and as Paul alluded to, you have people of a certain age, certain account balance, they are a flight risk. And if you're not talking to your members about keeping them engaged and delighted in terms of the choices they make, let me assure you someone is. And they're likely to be an SMSF administrator, accountant or financial planner. And we're targeting this pretty much at those members who are, as I call them, flight risks now for SMSF. If we get this right, then we may attract business, but is that my cue? Okay. But it is fundamentally a retention play. And it is the first stage of our product pathway to really enhance and develop our choice proposition in a post-FOFA MySuper world. But we're not going to stop there, and I think I'm able to talk a little bit about this, given that my CEO, I think, has publicly announced that we were doing this. So later this year, we will be launching a pooled superannuation trust. And Hostplus Fund will invest lock, stock and barrel in that pooled superannuation trust. that vehicle gives us the opportunity to have a very different discussion with superannuation funds going forward. It allows funds, whether they be APRA-regulated funds or at the other end of the spectrum, a brand new SMSF, to the opportunity to invest in and alongside Hostplus in its award-winning investment strategies and assets. We believe that if we get that strategy right, it will be a very compelling discussion, and I'm happy to talk at a future CMSF about other products and services that will leverage that going forward. But these are the two key planks in our response to the SMSF challenge this year, and maybe we can come back at a later date and tell you how that's going. But we're quite excited about both of these products and how we will have a very different conversation with those funds going forward. I can move on. Okay, now this is not a panacea. This is not the hassle-free, no worries option I talked about earlier. We're not about making the guy on the left into one of the guys on the right. That's not what this is about. For Hostplus, though, we want to be able to offer our members access to an SMSF experience, if that is what they want, while remaining within the strength and security of a major professionally run superannuation fund, enjoying all of the benefits that come with that, including not upsetting group life insurance arrangements and a plethora of ancillary products and services that our members love us for. But as I said, it also gives us that opportunity to provide that external opportunity to connect with and provide an even better risk-adjusted outcome for some SMSFs. And we just simply ask to be considered on our merits in the SMSF world. We'll live and die by our results, but already initial discussions with that sector have been very positive, and again, in a post-FOFA, post-My Super Choice world, that's a new conversation we're very much looking forward to have.